So I'm sorry that I can't be with you all today at the Cleantech Effect. Taking the easy way out though. I'm down at the beach, down at Cotton Tree, in these lovely surroundings, and it's a really perfect setting to be talking about the 50 years of growth that's happened here on the Sunshine Coast, and to really ponder and think about what might be ahead of us in terms of the next 50 years. My understanding of the last 50 years of development is that it could be easily characterised by the shift of development from the hinterland and the rail corridor to the coastal area. And I think that's one of the most significant things to sort of understand about the change that's really occurred over the last 50 years. In addition, we've had some quite radical changes in construction technology, which has afforded us an increase in density here on the Sunshine Coast generally. But I think it's probably fair to say that we've squandered a lot of that density and the uplift that we could have gained from that urbanisation with a sort of a very generous approach and a bit of urban sprawl, or quite a lot of urban sprawl. So the next 25 to 50 years of growth can't be easily predicted. We know that there's going to be significant change in that time. So my hope for the next period, in terms of the growth and settlement patterns that happen here, I think can be loosely characterised into four main areas. I think what we have done very successfully over the last part of the last 50 years has really come to understand the importance of character, our character, and the importance of regional identity here on the Sunshine Coast. And I really hope that we'll take that to another level in the next 25 to 50 years. I think we have an inherent understanding about the value of a lower rise of development and a lower scale of architecture, an architecture that's very much rooted or placed on the ground, and a style of living that's very much connected to the ground plane. And that doesn't mean that we don't like height or that we can't have taller buildings, but it just means that the way that those buildings are designed really firmly acknowledges the landscape and the place on which they sit, and that they touch the earth lightly, and slightly, as well as lightly. But they also focus on climate, but they focus outwards and into views. And I think the architecture that is already emerging really starts to celebrate those and really claim them as very significant Sunshine Coast attributes. The next aspect that I'd like to see emerge and us really focus on in the next while is the notion of livability. And for me, that really means understanding and focusing on a human-centred approach to design. I've already seen an emerging sort of feeling and design aesthetic that's more rooted around the humane scale, but more importantly around a physiological response to design, about the way that people's bodies respond to climate, rather than relying on active systems around air conditioning and mechanical ventilation and even mechanical light. What we're seeing from a lot of our clients and from a lot of users here on the Sunshine Coast is they want a more real response from their buildings, and they want to really feel their bodies in a more practical way. The third influence that I think will drive or have a significant impact on our settlement pattern in the next while is the notion of equity and inclusion. This is becoming an important factor in cities and design theory around the world, and as our culture inevitably changes here on the Sunshine Coast and becomes more diverse, it'll be a really powerful shaper of the way we do things here. And equity will take the form of things like more affordable construction technologies that will drive better access to housing. It'll drive new socially aware funding models for housing and for access to housing, and the way that housing and office structures are delivered, so that more people can have access to them for living, also for public space, the way they access public space, but also for commerce and the way that they drive business and enterprise. But I started this discussion talking about what's happened in the last 50 years about the shift from hinterland settlement into the coastal area. And I think what I suspect might happen in the next 50 years is a change to that. And I'm not suggesting that we'll move back to the hinterland area, but what's been really interesting about what we've created here on the coast in the last 50 years is that we've developed these very north-south patterns of movement and development. And that stretches from Caloundra to Noosa and even to Gympie. And that's a valid way to develop, and it's an efficient way to develop. But I think as we start to think about and react and respond to climate change, that what will start to develop is a new pattern of development around retreat. And that will get us thinking about the way that we live parts of our lives on the coast throughout the year and parts of our lives perhaps in the hinterland areas. And that will start to develop some movement patterns and some development patterns that connect the coast back to the hinterland in a really profound way. And that means changing our transport corridors, and it means actually us thinking about the way that we live around the calendar in different ways to respond to the climate and the climate change effects. it's easy to forget that we've had a really rapid period of change over the last 50 years. And that's not been without its pain. You know, we've had a lot of debate and conversation about our urban footprint and where we should develop. But I'd like to think we're coming into a new era where a lot of those battles and those arguments are behind us, and that what we've got ahead of us is a period of really intense consolidation and maturing and an understanding about how design can really bring and inform the identity here of us as residents on the Sunshine Coast, how it can actually create mechanisms to invite new people and include more people and share the great things that we have here. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you all today, and I wish you well for the rest of the conference. Thank you.